to both the CIDOC CRM ontology with the presentation by Stephen Stead, as well as a introduction to the linked art data model with a 2-hour session. And so today, this session is really for you, the audience, to meet the chairs and the members of both groups here today. It's also a good opportunity to talk about how all the CIDOC working groups work towards the same kind of overarching goal, which is to encourage museums to produce better documented data. And so to achieve this, the CIDOC working groups want to be consistent and work in collaboration as much as possible with one another. And that's one of the manifestations of this collaboration going on. So we have a few questions ready in our heads to tackle, to present our respective working groups. But maybe we could just go around the screen here and introduce ourselves for a minute. So I'll start us off. I'm Emmanuel Delmas-Glass. I'm at the Yale Center for British Art in the US. I'm also co-chair of the Linked Art Working Group with Rob Sanderson and Thanasis Berlioz. So the next one on my screen, I don't know if you guys see the same thing, so I'm gonna start with Rob. He's directly right after me.
So I'm Rob Sanderson, co-chair along with Manuel and Thanasis of Linked Art. Now at Yale, previously at the Getty earlier this year. And a member of the CRM-SIG. Thanasis is below me.
Yes, hello, and I'm Thanasis Berlioz. I'm a reader in documentation at the University of the Arts London. And I'm a member of the CRM-SIG, recently also joined the editorial group. And I'm also the third co-chair of the Linked Art group. And I'm also the PI for a sister project called Linked Conservation Data. That's my background and my interest primarily.
George, did you want to go next? Oh, no. Yeah?
I can go next if it helps. So I'm George Brisaker, and I wear many hats, and I am a member of Linked Art, but in my capacity today, I am vice chair of the CRM-SIG, and so I'm here to talk about that and talk about the connections that can occur and should occur between Linked Art, CRM-SIG, and other projects that are trying to implement CRM.
Kevin, did you want to say a word next?
So hello, my name is Kevin Page. I'm associate faculty at the University of Oxford e-Research Centre. I'm a member of the Linked Art editorial board and also PI on a couple of projects funded by the UK's AHRC, working with and on Linked Art.
And last but not least, we've got Antoine.
Hey everyone, I'm Antoine Isaac, working as R&D manager for Europeana, member of the Linked Art Advisory Board, and very interested in discussions about interoperability and how all these efforts in Linked Art and CRM connect with what Europeana is trying to do for the exchange of cultural heritage data across Europe.
Thank you all. So maybe we should start with a general question and really remind everybody with us today what the specific aims and goals of each working group is or are. I know yesterday there were questions about the interactions and maybe overlaps between the CIDOC CRM and Linked Art, and maybe even other working groups such as LIDO. So if somebody could talk about that for a minute, that'd be great.
Well, if I give the the non-slidey 30-second reintroduction of linked art, and then George can talk about the SIG. And I see that we have Ana Alvarez, one of the chairs for Domino. Perhaps if we could, Ana, if we can call on you to also talk about Domino, that would be wonderful for some of the sort of horizontal collaboration that we would really love to try and get out of the session. Before I start, just one more word of introduction about the session. As per our keynote yesterday, there was a question from Trosa about how do we maximize the platform for the coffee break sorts of interactions. I think this session, we are trying to be much less formal. It's less of a conference presentation session and more of a discussion session that may have happened with glasses in hand at a reception. It might have happened in a room with a round table that people are sitting at, or it could have happened just in the corridors of the conference. So please do imagine yourself in that space, and do, if you would like to say something, I believe, Emmanuel, we can promote people from attendee to panelist with relative ease. So do just put into the chat, wave hands, I'd like to say something, and we'll try and do that. Okay, so linked art. The easiest way, I think, to describe linked art and its relationship to the other CIDOC working groups is that it is a profile of CIDOC CRM, trying to make it a little bit easier to implement within a specific domain of artworks. So imagine that you have something extremely powerful but very open and flexible, like the CRM. Then it would be nice to be able to say, oh, well, here is my use case, and this is how we can use the tools in that toolbox. But different domains have different requirements, and not everyone needs every single tool in the toolbox. So linked art is an attempt to pick out a selection of tools that work together nicely and fit together easily to describe artworks and the related entities and activities such as people, places, and events. So if you imagine a car, CRM, if you're in the CRM-SIG, you are a ontological mechanic, and you have access to every single piece of functionality that a car can offer you. But you've probably spent quite some time thinking about how cars work, and you know that you can break things pretty easily if you do something wrong. Most people, however, are not mechanics. They just want to drive a car, and that's where we feel linked art is. We are trying to produce the car with the steering wheel and the pedals and so on that is easy to operate and easy to work with, as opposed to by reducing the power and the scope from the full CRM down to something that people can more easily engage with, without also losing the ability for people who want to tinker and become mechanics through practice. So I'd hand over to George maybe to talk about the CRM.
Great, yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with the way you describe it, Rob. So the sort of scope and almost the mandate of the CRM-SIG, as I understand it, is to enable cultural heritage data integration from memory institutions like museums. And so it was given a sort of scope to make possible data integration of information arising from memory institutions, and landed upon the methodology of conceptual modeling and creating formal ontologies many a year ago. And so the direct object of our work is getting in data structures or questions, research questions from people working in the domain, and looking at it at a meta level and trying to understand and structure high-level formal ontological structures like concepts and relations that will allow this integration. And so it's a fairly abstract committee, as I'm describing it, that once you get the taste for it, it's quite interesting, and we certainly want people to join and be interested in that process itself. But it's definitely not for, not everyone wants to directly engage in the process of conceptual modeling. Some people want to take the product of conceptual modeling, which is the concepts and relations, and use it to integrate data. And they want to do that because they're not even particularly interested in integrating data. They want to ask and answer questions in research or in their institutions. So there is no clash between CRM-SIG and other working groups like LinkedArt and Lido and others who are taking up the standards that we build and making them something that can be in the hands of specialists, researchers, museum professionals who are trying to do something with their data using the tools of the conceptual modeling that we do. So yeah, our scope is interacting with the other committees of CIDOC to understand what the requirements are, the evolving requirements of information management in the documentation community, and then trying to make sure that this top level tool of the concepts and relations provided by the ontology give you the expressive power to do something. And so we want people from other committees and from CIDOC in general to interact with us. We don't want to be alone. But that's towards enabling people to do mostly the work that people want to do is something related to do with their institution or their research, which can be enabled by committees like LinkedArt and Lido and so on, which are putting tools in people's hands for doing some work. So I think that would be my quick summary of how I think things are positioned.
Great. And I think it's worth noting that the CRM working group is one of the first working groups of CIDOC in general. And speaking of which, maybe we should give Anna, who just joined us as a panelist, maybe we should give her a minute to introduce herself. And Anna, would you mind saying a few words about the brand new Domino working group?
Hello, it's a bit of a surprise to be invited
to the invite so quickly
into the panel. We are rushing, preparing our first session, which is coming afterwards, and so I'm a bit stressed right now. Well, Domino is a new working group which is looking for dissemination. So it's really going to work with all the groups because we feel that the reality within Spanish-Portuguese museums is very wide, from big museums, perhaps in Europeana, for example. I belong to the expert group, and I can see a reality which is amazing, and then a reality which is much more down to earth of small museums in other circumstances and countries and cultural realities which are really very different. So perhaps Domino has the ability to take the best of what is being done and also explain it and put it forward in Spanish and Portuguese, because I feel the Spanish museums, Portuguese museums, South American are doing great things, but sometimes the linguistic gap is a barrier to share experiences and to participate in CIDOC.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, so we're looking forward to collaborating with Domino, which is going to be a great dissemination working group for the work done within all of the CIDOC working groups, but in Spanish. So thinking, of course, of our members in South America and everywhere else in the world who speak Spanish. So that's going to be a fantastic boost for spreading the news about CIDOC and the great work that all of our members are doing around standards and culture in general, really. Thank you for that. Yeah. Good luck with your session next. I know we'll stack back to back here. In terms of presenting the working groups a little bit more, I'm circling back to the CRM and linked art. Are there ongoing projects right now or implementations that you would want to highlight? I'm looking at Antoine and Kevin, who haven't talked yet. You know, are there specific areas of research around those two standards that you would want to highlight for our audience today?
Well, perhaps we can go across Thanasis, then Kevin, then Antoine to talk about LCD and the AHS work and Europeana.
Yeah, sure. I can start. I mean, just coming back to the previous sort of summaries around the CRM-SIG and the linked art group. One thing I would like to emphasize is the educational nature of the work as well. And coming to this field from conservation with very little understanding of what, you know, ontology is and what a profile is and what linked data is and so on. Really, I learned through attending the CRM meetings and the linked art meetings, and obviously I'm still learning. But it's important to say that they're very friendly environments, very inclusive, and you know, all the members who have more experience are ready to answer questions, no matter how early in the stage of development a project is. And that was sort of that's my experience, and that sort of helped me when I was thinking about the linked conservation data project, because I knew there were people that I could rely on with the more technical discussions. And linked conservation data is a project looking at documentation within the field of conservation. I need to say that it's also funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, like part of the funding that has gone to linked art, in fact, the same funding call. And what we have been doing is to look at the CRM as a model for expressing statements around conservation documentation, and identify the areas where perhaps we need to expand that model a little bit. So, for example, there are in conservation, the treatment proposals, so things that might happen in the future, are quite important parts of the documentation. And the CRM doesn't quite deal with that area so much in detail. So we are working with the SIG to improve in that area, for example. So we are relying on the CIDOC CRM to give us that ontological base, and also one of its extensions, the CRM-SIG for science. And we're contributing, as for part of the discussion with the SIG, areas of the model that perhaps are more specific to conservation, but maybe they're also useful for other domains. So that's where the project is placed in relation to the CRM. Now, we're also working with the linked art group as much as possible. And the reason that there are two reasons for that, I think, and I hope Rob agrees. One is the recommendation of including some conservation data within the linked art model, and that will be a basic, an introductory level of conservation data that perhaps is interesting, is of interest to a broader audience. So we've made a few recommendations of where we think conservation data can be accommodated within the linked art profile, and we've got planned a joint session with the linked art group. I think it's next week to discuss this in more detail. But also we're using linked art as a model of how perhaps we can develop a conservation profile in the future based on linked art, almost like an extension of linked art. And the idea is that the work that has been going on within linked art and all the technical tools that will result from all that discussion can be adopted by smaller projects like, you know, the linked conservation data, and without, you know, having to repeat all that work. I mean, as a domain, conservation, it's very difficult to be able to embark in big software development projects. Yeah, so we're trying to steal as much as we can from every other group that's doing similar work. And so I think, you know, it would not have been possible to even begin to think around linked conservation data and the aspects of, you know, improving conservation documentation without, you know, being part of the CRM-SIG group and the linked art group. And it's been, you know, a catalyst for us, and I hope in the not so distant future we'll be able to share conservation data in the same way that linked art shares catalog data from member organizations. I hope this gives an overview of what's happening. But, and any questions around that, please feel free to get in touch. And also, if you know conservators that are interested in this field through the linked art group, maybe they can get in touch.
That was great. Thanks, Thanasis. It's great to see in your work, the way you explain it, the synergy between CRM, linked art, and other models or profiles consistent with that ontological base, isn't it? I mean, that paints a landscape of standards that's really telling. Thanks for that. Kevin, I know you have a project you wanted to tell us about today related to linked art.
Yeah, I can tell everyone, give everyone some background on that. So we were also, as with Thanasis' projects, happy to receive some funding from the UK's Arts and Humanities Research Council. We actually previously had a research network grant on linked art, which helped support some of the work around the editorial board and the standard itself. And the current project we have going is called quite unimaginatively Linked Art 2, but perhaps the part after that is more informative, which is around developing community practice and scholarship. And I think that's the part I'd like to focus on, is, again, in terms of bringing pieces together, how this all can feed into digital scholarship. I work in a centre that looks at using digital methods for research, typically in what might be termed sort of the digital humanities and the areas within that. And obviously, you know, the foundation, the bedrock for that is getting data out of the various institutions that are represented here through the various standards that are represented here. And really, that's the first step in terms of moving forward that we need to get through in terms of undertaking new and novel digital research across these different collections. And that puts us kind of on the bridge between the conceptual underpinnings that come from the CRM, for instance, which are obviously very important in terms of how the information is conceptually represented and structured, and then the practicalities of actually needing to get some data out, which comes through from work such as linked art. So again, I think, you know, previous speeches have set it out very well. It really is about how all these pieces fit together. We need all of these elements working together to be able to move forward then from our perspective in terms of using that data. Again, I'd say in terms of community, it's a very welcoming community and one that's pleased to work with people. That's something we'll be moving forward within our project next year. Actually, I can use this as a bit of a plug to say, look out next year. One of the things we'll be doing is putting a call out for ideas of exemplars of working with data, And again, we'll be providing some effort through the research project to try and find the right tools. Again, very much reflecting what Thanasis was said. We don't have the resources in typical digital humanities projects to engineer the complete solution to everything. So it's very much about working out the important pieces of tooling that can be invoked to solve a particular problem within the context of the data that's available, and making that all very practical and work together. So hopefully in the spring, there will be a call going out for people who are working to work with exemplars, either from the data side or from the scholarship side. And I'd say please keep an eye out for that. And we'll look forward to working with people on realizing some of this data through to digital humanities projects.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, we've invited a few more members of the audience to join us as panelists. I think that's easier to have a conversation, to actually see each other on a tiny little screen. So we've got a number of new guests. Thank you all. If you want to say a word, that's great. If you're not ready, we'll understand. This is very last minute. But I know we have Joe with us on the line. Joe, if you wanted to say maybe a few words about how you've been considering working with LinkArt and the for National Gallery research project. Great.
Hi, sorry, I got kicked out and had to come back in again, and that just confused me. Hello, I'm Joe Padfield. I work at the National Gallery, and I've been involved in a number of documentation projects. And we're currently exploring several ways of trying to organize data sets in relation to LinkArt and the CIDOC CRM, specifically within an EU-funded project called SHOC, which is Social Science Humanities Open Cloud project. But we've been trying to look at the massive wealth of data that the National Gallery has and how we can organize it in such a way that other people can access it and use it beyond sort of picking up scholarly catalogues and reading books. We've been experimenting with this with a number of occasions. So at the moment we're in the process of developing a system of middleware to bring lots of our internal resources together so we can start to share them. But then if we just share them the way they are, there are a mess of different data IDs and different structures and different schemas from all sorts of different systems. So we want to bring all of these together under agreed sort of domain standards such as LinkArt and CIDOC CRM, so that they make sense, A, to us ourselves, but B, to anyone else who might be able to use them. So we're very interested in the development of both these areas.
Thank you, Joe. And why don't we turn to Antoine for a minute or two to talk about his work with LinkArt at Europeana. I think that will give us a good tour of the different applications of the standard, of the model.
Sure. So actually, maybe to the point that the previous panelists have made, LinkArt is a very welcoming group, because Europeana is actually not using LinkArt at the moment. And we are not committing to using it for ourselves in the very near future, but we are extremely interested in it for our partners. As I think Kevin said, it's about putting all pieces together. So the Europeana data model is actually not strictly reducing CRM also, so we are really bad. But we are actually quite well aligned with it. We got inspiration, there is a conceptual alignment in some places, but we are really far from the complete implementation of CRM. So we can't go into all details because Europeana, actually, we don't know whether we have all the use cases for implementing, I don't know, perhaps even 10% of CRM. As we are getting very diverse data, and our use cases have to be fairly generic. So, for example, we've stopped short of implementing events in our data ingestion pipeline. So, which is quite a big shortcoming for museum originated data that is full of events, and that's probably a great loss for us. So we are currently looking at how to do things better. We have discussions with some people on the community, actually with some people who are having some events parallel to this one at the moment we speak, on Lido, for example. But one difficult side of this exercise is to make sure that, again, we would do efforts that correspond to real use cases, and use cases that are shared enough and that are tackled in a realistic way. So we are interested really in practical approaches, things that will not blow when our partners, who sometimes don't have a lot of resources, will try to apprehend them and later to implement them. And the linked art approach for this, which is trying to reuse as much as possible existing patterns, so looking very closely at CRM, but not reusing everything, but hopefully much more than what Europeana does. So for us, we are looking at this as an opportunity to see what can be done in the community that would sort of allow us to promote the sharing of a bit richer data that would be relatively easy for us to also ingest and benefit from in the medium or long-term future. There's also one side thing that's, for us, it's still the opportunity to promote some of the frameworks we are really interested in, for example, on copyrights. So we have these rights statements. There is this rights statements initiative in which we are involved, and it's great to see that sometimes for some very specific aspects, initiative like linked arts look and reuse the same things as what we are looking at. Again, trying to make progress as a community.
That's great. I'm hearing a lot of real life, real data kind of usage all throughout. That's really fantastic. Could I turn to Thomas for a minute? So Thomas will actually present tomorrow on his work in Zurich on control vocabularies. But Thomas has very much been part of the CRM and linked art working groups. I wonder if you could say a few words about that, Thomas.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me. Good afternoon, everyone. So what we do at the Swiss Art Research Infrastructure, the mission is actually to combine the expert knowledge from specialized research institutions. And the more and more we worked on it, we have been engaging in the CIDOC CRM-SIG in the community. We have developed our own, let's say, research-centered models with the variety of George Brusacker and Nicola Carboni, George being research fellow at the University of Zurich. And the more we're actually working with real-world scenario or real-world data and being confronted of the problem of how to consume data, it appeared to us immediately that the linked art approach is quite useful for us. The more and more, especially that we go into collection data, which we currently do. So we are currently modeling a huge architectural archive at the ETH Zurich, where I'm director of digital art history. And we are also currently in a project which we have presented recently, which deals about a very specific sort of reusable art pieces of, essentially it's prints that are being recolored. That's extremely specific to Switzerland, so nobody else has it, and we kind of felt the obligation to make sure that these data actually can be consumed. And this is actually where linked art has kicked in. I won't lie to you saying that we are not that far in the implementation of it, but we are deadly decided to go down this path and to make sure that these data will be available according to the linked art standard. And this is also, for us, it is important, for instance, when we do model like provenance questions in archives. We just had the discussion a few days ago, and that's actually where we had to decide: do we have our own model, or do we just go for linked art? And we obviously decided to go for linked art just because it doesn't make sense to come up with a new potential model for very few cases that we have, where in case we actually need to model these data, we can go for the very explicit modeling that has been proposed as part of linked art. And so we are extremely happy with this collaboration, and we are happy to contribute data to this standard.
Really interesting to hear that linked art solves most of your requirements when it comes to working with the large ecosystem of data you're working with. That's looking forward to that introduction. Yeah, can I turn to Carlota for a minute, and could you please say a few words about how linked art and the CRM come into the work you're currently doing?
Hi, everyone. Moment. I think also from Thomas's point about the focus, the same with Thanasis's work with conservation data, because we are building with a toolkit, you can pull in pieces from other sets, like Legos. And to get conservation data in, it's not that you have to start from scratch. It's that we can use the same basic models, and then we just add new pieces from different sets. And the same with the research component from SARI, that by investing in some of the skills needed for the mechanic side of things, or working with mechanics like George, we can improve the overall ecosystem or the landscape by adding little pieces to fulfill different use cases, rather than starting again from scratch. And then thereby everything gets better all at once, as opposed to having lots of half-formed systems that then require a lot more maintenance. Sorry.
And I might just add at that point, I think that even extends perhaps beyond the groups and the standards that are being inspected here, but also into things like IIIF. It certainly feels to us from our work that we're at a threshold where there are enough emerging pieces of technology which aren't trying to solve the whole problem, but are trying to very concentratedly solve a part of the puzzle. And enough of those pieces are now coming together that there's a really good basis to pull them together into the various pieces of application and work that we're doing. And that's a really encouraging and fantastic place to be.
Sorry, Carlota, please.
Yes, hi everyone, and I will quote Kevin on this. We have to deal with this national puzzle. So it's I'm part of the Towards the National Collection, again AHRC funded, and we're just now starting as a very young program, so I cannot say too much about what we're doing. Projects that started a while ago, and Joe is in one of them for the IIIF part. And we are just now in the process of looking into the discovery projects, which will be larger projects that will deal with several pieces of the puzzle. So of course, our big issue is to connect all of the collections and at the national scale. I cannot reveal too much about what we're doing right now, also because I was appointed 2 months ago, so it's a very fresh start for me. But if Joe wants to say something about his current project within the tank, that's great. And thank you all.
I could just say that in the foundation sort of stage, there's 8, I think, foundation projects that are all exploring parts of the puzzle. So I'm leading a project on IIIF. There's another project looking at persistent identifiers. There's another project looking at connecting collections to Wikidata and other sources of information. There are other projects looking at the difficulty of how we use language and whether we're all sort of meaning the same thing when we're using the languages that we use. And a lot of these are building blocks of how you might build a national collection in the future and bringing all these things together. So linked art and the CIDOC CRM both provide possibilities as the glue to link all of that knowledge together once we actually start to gather information from the 3,000-4,000 public collections in the UK as a whole sometime in the future. So it's a very, very important part or jigsaw puzzle part of the whole thing that will become a national collection.
Thank you, Joe. Can I now turn to Erin Canning, I think, who joins us from Canada to talk about how linked art and the CRM and art come into play in her work?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I have some machinery running behind me, so if you hear some whining, I apologize for the background noise. My name's Erin. I'm the Ontology Systems Analyst at LINX, which is a relatively new Canadian digital humanities project. We just started up officially in April 2020. The goal of which is to convert a large number of humanities researcher data sets into linked open data in some sort of shared ecosystem. So I'm working mostly with academic researchers and research data as opposed to cultural institutions collections data, but there's a lot of crossover between these two areas and pieces of data from both sides that could arguably fit into the other. So because we're working with such a wide variety of data, we definitely need an ontology support that has a level of abstraction that will allow communication across all of these very wide domains. And really as well to get the work completed in the grant time that we have, which is 3 years. That focus, as other folks have brought up, on practicality, reusing common and existing patterns will be really key to this being a successful project. We're also looking to align with other things in the same domain, particularly Canadian data domains. So looking to CHIN, the Canadian Heritage Information Network, and the work that they're doing in modeling as well. And I know that they've been on their linked art calls and are familiar to that as well. So trying to align in that area to the extent that is reasonable for all of our use cases or both of our use cases. Yeah, and really taking advantage of, as was also just talked about, the work, the really specific concentrated work that's gone on to solve discrete domain problems will be really important to the various researchers that are highly invested and interested in those particular areas, and then bringing something that can work together as opposed to either trying to force everything into something that doesn't fit for everyone or starting from scratch for every area that we're working in. Yeah, so that's what we're up to, and we're hoping to start converting data sets January 2021.
Fantastic. Wow. So I'm hearing some parallels with the UK National Collections project, but it seems that you're working with a broader set of disciplines, maybe?
Yeah, yes, I think so. That's the impression that I get, at least looking at the two projects, working with social science data sets, music data sets, a lot of person histories, biographies, and literature, but not just the works themselves, the scholarly commentary that's occurred around those works over time.
And I think we also have John McQuaid on the line with us. John, maybe I didn't make you a panelist, sorry, I'll do that now. So John joins us from the Frick collection in New York and has been a linked art working group member for some time now. John, sorry, I've just added you to the screen of panelists if you wanted to say a few words. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Please tell me you can hear me. I had.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I had a Monday of microphone issues. Yes. At the Frick, in the photo archive, we have 1.2 million photographs of works of art. approximately right now 350,000 have been digitized, and we are now working to just make that available as possible. I think linked art is one of the best ways that we can do that. I don't want to step on like Jonathan Lill at MoMA, but one of the things that like the exhibition cataloging that we have and the provenance data that we have is something that I'm very interested in for linked art, and the way that that can be linked into other databases, and also so we're not doing things that are so I'm not doing the things that other people are doing. Like, that's my whole point, is I don't want to repeat other people's work. And that is one of the benefits of linked art and linked data in general. And I know Emmanuel and George are also have something, you're because of Pharos, which is the a group of photo archives in the US and England and Europe, which is now separate. But that's also something that is going to be really important, because there was a call yesterday where I think we do need to have structured data for the museum world and the art world. And AAT is good, it's great, but this was, this is something that is really, really important and will solve a lot of problems. So, sorry, I might have rambled a bit, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And Rob, thank you. I think you're totally right. Like, what we need right now is something like the round table or the coffee break situation that we don't have. We haven't had in 9 months, and I'm totally up for that.
Thanks for your perspective on things, John. That's great. George, I'm turning towards you, I think, as one of the thought leaders behind the data work for the Pharos Photo Archives project. Or do you want me to say a few words?
I mean, you're certainly a more foundational member in Pharos than myself, so I can say a few things, but you're probably a better person to speak to the goals and the.
I can start us off then. So for the Pharos Photo Archives project is an international consortium of 14 institutions from Europe, Italy, and some institutions in the US, such as the Frick and the Yale Center for British Art, and a number of others. And so we're looking at essentially giving a new life to the photo archives that we have in our collections, which are essentially black and white photographs pasted, glued on mounts, right? Which was basically the internet before the internet for all the researchers that would travel throughout the world and come to all of our respective collections to not only look at the objects, the 3D, the original objects in the collections, but also at those archival collections, if you will. And so those 14 institutions have decided to kind of revive this trove of information for their researchers and others. And in doing that, not only expressing the knowledge of those photo archives collections in the web, publishing it, but also expressing it in a linked open data manner. And and a number of linked art data models will be used to do that work. So not only to express the richness of the information in each collection, but also as a joining up mechanism across all 14 institutions with connections to external authorities, very much the way a number of you have said already, looking at the Getty vocabularies and maybe others. So that's kind of the 30-second snapshot of it. George, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll just add a little parenthesis onto everything you already said, which really gives the picture. Just to say that it's one of those cases, Fados, which is so beautiful for linked data because it's all these institutions are doing the same thing. And they're locked into different information systems, but the world that they're describing is the same world, and you really want to see those things together, and you could imagine so many more research possibilities once you aren't artificially within all the research is great, all the data is great, and even the information systems themselves can be great, but who wants to learn 14 different information systems to try to get a picture over this world of data? You don't. And so it's just a really nice project for what it will produce, and also the fact that for conceptual modeling, because and this approach of having done some groundwork like linked art in advance, so that when you come to the process of doing modeling from a system into linked open data using CRM in this case, that you're already solving many problems before you start the game, and you just deal with that, with the easy stuff. You not only you don't have to think about it, but you've aligned how you're doing things, and then you can spend more time on the stuff that's hard to think through and hard to represent, and maybe you need to do more engineering with the conceptual models. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I've just added Jonathan Lil from MoMA to our panel. Hey, John.
Hello. Good to see everybody. We don't use video usually in our weekly calls, so I forget what people look like. I just was happy to jump in after John McQuaid and talk about MoMA's particular activities, which are centered mainly in the library archive and the archives, and grow out of our work with exhibition history at MoMA and the types of archival documentation produced by exhibitions and all the conceptual complexities of exhibitions, which frankly, TMS, which is MoMA's collection management system, TMS does not handle adequately. It handles only in a very basic manner. And more people, institutions and projects are publishing complex exhibition data online. And I'm really trying to think about how we can advance linking them all together. So not only to express the complexities in MoMA's data, but using that framework to connect to these other sources. And I'm thinking of the Base Salon and the Chronicle 250, as well as the museums like the National Gallery of Art in the United States and the Art Institute of Chicago, who are publishing full exhibition histories online. Yeah.
That's great. That's a really good trip throughout all CRM linked art related projects, isn't it? I'm reminded that we have 3 minutes left. There's a session right after us here. Are there any questions from the audience? Any observations? Any news you might want to share? Or do you have any projects, ideas that might make use of either CRM or linked art or a combination of?
Dave would be okay with talking about the National Gallery.
Yes. Dave, feel free to jump in while I bring you to the panel.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm a little backlit, but yeah. So at the National Gallery, you know, linked art is appealing to us because we contract out for certain applications like mobile applications, and so we're you know, periodically faced with having to present an application programming interface to vendors to develop solutions for us that involve art data and imagery and the like. And you know, historically that has consisted of a hodgepodge of various solutions, and so linked art is very appealing because it aims not only to standardize the model, but also eventually an API for accessing the data. And the promise of the conceptual model is that over time it will start from a skeleton of data that you know, where the scope is well defined, and then be able to drill down and evolve over time. So that's very exciting for us. And we took, there's a project called Conservation Space, and we had specified and developed a JSON-based API for that project. And so what we have done with linked art is started to evolve that Conservation Space API to be supplemented with the modeling concepts of linked art. So that's a work in progress, but we also have a mobile application that actually works and uses a public API endpoint for that. So we're happy about that, and we expect the work to continue, particularly as the linked art standards evolve and start to stabilize with versions and releases.
Thanks so much, Dave. I'm watching the clock, and maybe I'd have just a little bit of time to remind you and invite you all to come to participate in our third linked art session tomorrow at 10:15 a.m. Geneva time, where we'll have a live session of data modeling again. A little bit on the model of what we did on Monday afternoon. We might be using data from MoMA or the Rijksmuseum again, but actually, if you want to participate, you, the audience, in that session, please, you know, reach out to us ahead of time tomorrow and submit your data scenarios, and we'll be more than happy to tackle them. Otherwise, I think I have just enough time to take a group picture of our wonderful panel here. And give the line or the session back over to our conference organizers. Thank you so much for all the impromptu